Hey, what's up you guys? It's Jack, aka Summoner6, and welcome back to another video. Today, I have the start of a video series that I'm going to be doing for Valorant and a similar one for League of Legends, revolving around strategy and increasing your odds of winning. Today's video is going to set the foundation for future videos in the series, as we're going to be going over each agent's individual kit, as well as how these kits synergize to create unique win conditions. First, we have to establish our way of measuring and classifying each agent. And we all know the best way to measure an agent's strength is by smashing the like button down below for the YouTube algorithm. Also, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so that you know whenever the next video in this series goes live, as well as any other videos I make. And with that, let's actually dive in. The actual way that we'll classify agents is not through Riot's classifications. That is, Duelist, Initiator, Controller, and Sentinel. Instead, we're going to be using a different ideology popularized by LS or LostShadow. The way that LS characterized or classified League of Legends champions and their kits was actually using the Magic the Gathering color wheel, which is what we're going to be doing in this video. One of the things that he approaches games through is the lens of his experience in other games, such as RTSs like StarCraft, as well as card games like Magic the Gathering. This has actually proven to be a really successful mindset going into strategizing other games. Using past experience from other games and ways to create win conditions from other games and finding patterns in newer games is one of the easiest ways to increase win rate and increase understanding of a game. So we're going to be using that exact same Magic the Gathering MTG color wheel in Valorant. First, we have to reframe these color definitions. They are red, blue, green, white, and black into their Valorant equivalent. How do we define these colors? We're going to start with red because it's the easiest to define. Red in Magic the Gathering is all about aggression and limiting the responses that the opponent can take, limiting their options. It's essentially choking out the opponent of all of their win conditions as early on as possible so that you can create an easy win for yourself while dealing direct damage to their life points or their units. In Valorant, this translates to aggression, 1v1 potential, limiting options, and direct damage. A good example of something red in Valorant is Raze's paint shells. Raze's paint shells are used mainly aggressively, and they limit the options of opponents that they're tossed near, as they kind of have to get out of them or they're gonna die. They also do direct damage, as in it's really hard to trade that damage back onto the Raze. She can toss him off walls, she can toss him over walls, she can toss him into different corners of the map that you can't necessarily trade back onto the Raze if she throws her grenades at you. The Raze nades cost enemy opponents positioning, very important, and also armor and HP, and thus deal direct damage to them. What's ironic is that a good example of red is actually anti-T1. Everything that T1 does, but the opposite, is red, which is funny because T1's primary color is red. Next, let's talk about blue. Blue is all about information gathering and getting resource advantages in order to choke out slowly the enemy's options of winning. Basically speaking, the later a game goes, the more likely blue is to win. They do this by essentially stalling the game as long as possible and countering attacks that the enemy puts forward onto them. Essentially exhausting the enemy out of options of winning, and then blue deals the final blow. Blue in Valorant translates to control, stalling, info gathering, trickery, and indirect damage. Indirect damage is the use of abilities to cause the enemy team to make mistakes or to cause confusion in the enemy team. Control, in this scenario, we're going to define as forcing the enemy to do something they do not want to do. Essentially, a good example of a control-based utility is a Molotov or a Molly. Mollies deal damage in an area, and it is almost always optimal, except for in very niche cases, for an enemy to not enter or stand in a Molly. Otherwise, they're just going to die. Mollies force the enemy to do something that is not optimal for them in repositioning, and most of the time people are holding an angle that enables them to get a really free kill off of someone exiting a Molly. This is a perfect example of control. And a perfect example of blue in general is T1. T1 plays a huge info gathering and baiting utility game, and basically executes sites in the last 30 seconds of the game after a lot of the enemy team's utility has been used, and they've gathered as much info as possible in order to make a very quick executing decision. That's how they play when they're on the attacking side. On the defending side, they stall as long as possible to enable all 5 members to rotate so that it's as even as possible in terms of a 5v5, team versus team. The double Sentinel meta of Beta as well as Act 1 were actually perfect for the playstyle that T1 has. Now, the remaining 3 colors in green, white, and black are a little bit harder to define precisely in Valorant because they're a little bit more flexible in regards to Magic the Gathering. But we're going to do our best here, and we're going to create a little bit of overarching statements. It's not going to be perfect, but they're going to be close enough in regards to classifying agents. Let's start with green. In Magic the Gathering, green has the strongest individual units, and one of the ways it wins is by supporting its additional units, buffing its units, and debuffing the enemy units to win in exchanges over time and eventually win the game. In Valorant, we translate green to a supportive style agent. The way that we're going to define this is buffing allies, debuffing enemies, and any form of crowd control, or CC. The reason why it's buffing allies specifically and not including yourself is if you're buffing yourself, you're essentially helping aid your 1v1 potential, which is a red trait. If you are buffing somebody else, this is supportive. This is a green trait. A good example of something that is green is hard CC, which is the concussive CC that Breach provides. Breach's fault line as well as his ultimate provide hard CC, and that is a great example of something that would be green in the game. Next, let's take a look at white. White in Magic the Gathering is all about balance and order and shifting the laws and rules of engagement to favor yourself and give yourself an advantage. White, in an ideal sense, always wins wars of attrition. They will always have more units, they will always have more options than their opponents. The caveat to white is, given all of this flexibility, there isn't one most optimal choice for them to make at any stage of the game. So they can give themselves advantages and incremental advantages over time, but all of that can get wiped out by other regions. For Valorant, white roughly translates to flexibility, protection, and changing the battlefield or changing the environment in which you are attacking. You got to get this through your head. Even though smoke agents in Valorant are called controllers, smokes are not control. Smokes provide a change in the battlefield, a change in the sight lines, and smokes are actually an example of a white tactic, not a blue or control tactic. Since smokes don't inherently force enemies to make one choice, or rather, they create a plethora of choices. You can push the smoke, you can change the angle that you're going to fight from, you change the sight lines on sight. This is inherently a white thing. Last, we have black. Black in Magic the Gathering is defined as sacrificial, conditional, and parasitic. Black uses all of the resources at its disposal to create more power, even if that means sacrificing some of its own units in order to create power in another one. Black essentially uses sacrifice and hitting certain conditions in order to create more win conditions for itself, creating something out of something. In Valorant, this translates to sacrifice and conditions. Very simple. A great, in fact, perfect example of black is Reyna. Reyna has amazing abilities, but they come at a cost of condition. She's only allowed to heal herself or dismiss if she gets a kill on an enemy. That's a really hard condition to hit. And because of that, she is primarily a black agent. Or that's how we would classify her. All right, now that we've defined our colors, I'm going to measure each agent and provide the colors that I have classified each agent under. And then in a future video, we're going to talk about the agents in more detail, how they synergize together, and then how they synergize with maps. And all of these are going to come out in later videos. This one is just establishing what these agents' colors are and what the colors mean. Let's get into the agents. First, we have Breach. So Breach is going to be green and he's going to be red. Breach has hard CC from his signature ability, his fault line, as well as his ultimate. Breach really limits the options and chokes out the enemy using his aftershock. It also provides a decent amount of control for him. And Breach has 3 2-second flashes, which are most optimally used aggressively, pushing onto a site, as well as provide a debuff to enemies. They are flashed, they can't see. Next, let's move on to Brimstone. Brimstone is going to be white, blue, and green. Brimstone's advantage is that he has very thick smokes that can all be placed at the same time, essentially changing the entire battlefield of a site or a key area. He also has a molly, which can be used to control certain areas or stall certain pushes. His ult can also be used to control a large area of the map, preventing enemies from pushing into it, as well as stall enemies from being able to push onto a site, given you have stalled enough time. And his stim beacon provides a solid buff to teammates' fire rate as well as their reload speed. Next, we have Cypher. Cypher is very blue, and he's also a little bit of white. Cypher's ult and camera, as well as the dart from his camera, provide a lot of information about exactly where enemies are on the map. His tripwires are a major stalling tool, as well as provide information. His cages also provide a smoke-like flexibility and change to a site's layout. He can change the environment using his cyber cages, and they also provide information. They make noise whenever an enemy enters or leaves them. Overall, Cypher is the best info gathering agent in the entire game so far. Next, we have Jet. Jet is red, white, and blue. Very patriotic. Jett has 2 sets of dashes, which can both be used aggressively as well as tricks. Basically, the enemy doesn't know where to place their crosshair because her mobility is super high. Her ult gives her a lot of 1v1 potential as well as aggression. Essentially, she can be on the move while being able to one-shot headshot you with 100% precision. That's kind of intense. Her hover is a passive, which allows her even more trickery and also even more flexibility. She can reach places for free that other agents either have to use an ability for or simply can't reach. And her smokes provide her even more flexibility than the average controller agent, mainly because of the fact that she's the only agent that can use her smokes instantaneously. The caveat is that they last half as long. Next, let's talk about Killjoy. Killjoy is going to be blue and green. Killjoy turret provides great information as well as control, especially early on in rounds. Killjoy turret also applies a debuff. It causes enemies to flinch when they're hit by the turret at all, which is actually a huge advantage if you think about it. Alarm bot also provides great information as well as another debuff. It provides vulnerable, which allows you to deal double damage to that unit as long as vulnerable is active. And her mollies as well as her ult provide great control and stalling tools throughout the entire game. Next, let's talk about Omen. Omen is unique in that he's every color. Omen is very white. He's also red, blue, black, and green. He has a lot of flexibility in his kit with his huge hollow smokes that can change not only the battlefields on a site, but also within those smokes. He can use these smokes globally as well. His teleports and his ultimate can be used not only to trick people, but can also be used aggressively. They're flexible because they enable him to reach places on the map, like Jett, that people aren't expecting you to be, but they also have some level of sacrifice to them. They make a lot of noise, which can be used to your advantage in form of trickery, but also can play a factor in terms of getting you killed. And lastly, his flash provides a nearsighted as well as deafened debuff, which enables you to be even more aggressive with your kit, not only peeking around corners to get kills, but also teleporting behind people to get even more kills. Overall, the jack of all trades agent. Next, let's talk about Phoenix. Phoenix is going to be red, blue, green, and a little bit of white. The primary reason for the white in his kit is the flexibility that his self-healing gives him. Since he's able to heal himself using his wall and his molly, it gives him more options to use it rather than just one clear option. This self-healing also helps him 1v1 because he can have the confidence to go forward, take a gunfight, get a kill, heal himself, and then go forward again. Next, his flashes, like most other flashes in general, are most optimally used aggressively, and they provide a debuff to enemies since they're flashed. His ult gives him the ultimate aggression tool. He's able to go in and not worry about having to die as long as someone's watching his body, as long as somebody's watching his body. And he's able to get a ton of information because he's an actual person moving forward. He's able to take aggressive fights, get information, and get out safely. His blaze wall can be used not only to trick enemies into thinking that you're engaging a site, but it's also used as protection. It blocks information from enemies as you're advancing into a site or into a location. And his molly, like other mollies, is used to control and stall very well. Next, we have Raze. Raze is the closest to mono red we have in Valorant. In fact, all of her kit does direct damage. Her paint shells are very aggressive and limit the options of enemies, like we have said before. Her boombot and ult are also aggressive, and they also limit the options of enemies, as if they come out of hiding, they're going to get noticed in the form of the boombot, or they might just get instantly killed from the rocket. And the rocket gives her great 1v1 potential because as long as you're decent at aiming, you should be able to get one or even multiple kills with it. Lastly, her blast packs give her a little bit of flexibility, but are mainly used aggressively. You can also use them if you know the enemy is pinned in a location. You can do direct damage to them in order to soften them up so that you can then get an easy kill with them. Next, let's move on to Reyna. So as we said before, Reyna is very black, but she also has red and green and a little bit of blue. Reyna is the queen of conditions. Her self-healing and her dismiss require a kill, so even though they give her the highest 1v1 potential in the game, or even 1v many, they do come with conditions. Her dismiss also has the flexibility of it, which enables her to use it to get information or to trick enemies and bait them into focusing her while an ally rounds the corner and kills them while the crosshair is pointed on the Reyna. Her flash can be used aggressively and provides the debuff of flash, but also it deafens. And her ult makes her one of the best 1v1 agents in the game because it buffs her Q and her E, which even though they're conditional, it makes them even better. So every kill she gets, she just ramps up in power. Now let's move on to Sage. Sage is blue and green. Her heal or signature ability, which recharges, heals up her allies. Her slow orb is the premier stalling tool as it covers a decent area and it slows a lot. It also gives you some information because if enemies walk on it, then you can hear them. Her wall is also great for stalling as well as information. Think about it. If you place the wall and you hear people shooting at it, you should be able to count the number of different guns that are shooting at it, so you know roughly how many people are trying to enter the site through that wall. And her ult is a buff. It brings someone back from the dead. Now, it is technically conditional because it requires someone to die, but that happens so frequently and it's such a huge swing that we're going to ignore the black part of that ult, the conditional part, and we're just going to focus on the fact that it brings someone back. It is a huge green buff. Next, we have the new agent, as of the recording of this video, Skye. Skye is very green, has some black and blue, and a little bit of red. Skye is the best supportive agent in the game because her entire kit revolves around buffing her allies and debuffing her enemies. Her flashes can be used aggressively and also apply the debuff of a 2-second flash, much like Breach. The difference is that they are conditional. They can be killed. So if someone shoots the flash before the Skye decides to pop it, then the flash becomes worthless. Her Trailblazer provides a concussion debuff as well as information since it can just run in. But again, it's also conditional. It can also be killed. She also has to sacrifice a little bit because you can't control Skye and the Trailblazer at the same time. So someone needs to be watching Skye's body or should be watching Skye's body while she is in Trailblazer. Her ult provides a huge debuff in that it deafens and it provides nearsightedness, just like Omen, but it also gives you information on the 3 closest enemy agents to you. But again, these can be destroyed. Lastly, her heal can heal multiple allies, but it is also conditional as you have a bar for it and you can't be shooting while you're healing your allies. Next, let's talk about Sova. Sova is blue, red, and black. Shock Tart can be used for aggression, but it can also be used to control a specific area of the map or stall a push from a specific area of the map, since it threatens damage. Owl Drone acts very similarly to Skye's Trailblazer in that you get into it, you get a lot of info, and you're able to push safely using it. It provides a decent level of aggression as well. But you are sacrificing your own body, so someone should be watching you while you are going in with Owl Drone. His Recon Dart gives a lot of safe information, and it also can be used as a distraction, which your team can be aggressive on. Basically, people turn to try to shoot the Recon Dart, and then you guys push in, kill the people while they're turned. And lastly, his ult does a lot. His ult can be used to control space. His ult can be used to limit the options of enemies as they have to be moving side to side and constantly shifting their position if you know where they are. His ult can be used aggressively to deal direct damage to those that he can see using it. His ult can be used to stall enemies from pushing his site, and it also gives information on the number of enemies it hits. But it does come at a big sacrifice. It takes a long time to shoot each shot, and he has to have the bow and arrow out while he's doing it, so he can get pushed upon if enemies are nearby him, and they can kill him before he's able to actually be fully useful with it. And last but not least, let's talk about Viper. Viper is black, green, blue, and white. Almost the entirety of Viper's kit is based on the conditional bar that she has called Fuel. Her wall can be used for tricking the enemy, and her wall provides insane flexibility because it can nearly permanently change the way that a site or particular area of the map plays. The biggest problem is that it's both conditional because of the fuel as well as a sacrifice, as you can only place it down once every round and then you can no longer move it ever. Her smoke provides a lot of flexibility like other smokes. It does change the environment of a site or the location wherever you place it. But again, it's conditional. It runs on fuel just like the wall. It does have the advantage though that you can pick it up and move it to other areas of the map, which is pretty cool. And Viper's Molly is unique in that not only does it do the normal Molly things of control a particular area of the map and be used to stall enemies from pushing into you, but if you do happen to hit an enemy, it provides the vulnerable debuff, which is a really, really good debuff. Her ult is conditional in that you place it in one spot on the map and you kind of have to be near it in order for it to stay active. You can't leave it for too long, but it provides a huge amount of control as well as tricks, and it's very flexible. It completely changes the rules of engagement on a site or key area of the map. Viper has a huge advantage when fighting inside of her ultimate because she can see enemies before they can see her. Her ultimate also causes her passive to be inflicted upon enemies. In fact, her ult, her smoke, and her wall all cause decay on their enemies, which is a debuff. Decay decreases the HP of an enemy down to 1 hit points the longer that they stay inside of her ultimate, her smoke, or her wall. This is a really strong passive and a really strong debuff, which should enable her to see more play in the future. And you can also see this stalling enemies a decent amount because if her utility's up, they don't want to push through it and be weakened. I really look forward to developing these videos even further. Some of the videos I'm going to be making are specifics about the agents themselves. That's going to be the next video. How they pair up in duos, trios, and as overall team compositions and their win conditions. Getting a closer look into each map and what advantages and disadvantages certain agents have on each different map that's currently in Valorant. And what styles of play favor each of these maps, as well as good positions to hold on defense and great setups for attacks and executes on offense. I'm really excited to produce this series and I really hope you all enjoy it. So what I really want to know is, what did you think of the video? Was it interesting? Informative? Did it spark new ideas in your mind? Let me know in the comments down below, and please also feel free to send me any video suggestions you have. I want to make videos that are tailored for you, and I try to respond to every comment that gets posted down below, so if you just want to say hi or say thank you or you have any feedback for me, please leave it down below. I'll take a read and then I should be able to reply to you. And if you've gotten this far and you haven't already, please consider dropping a like and subscribe to the channel. And also, if you want to interact with me in real time, just hang out or watch me play these games and analyze my own mistakes, you can follow me and watch me go live in afternoons and evenings on Pacific Standard Time at twitch.tv/summoner6. You can also ask me questions and learn more about me through my Twitter @summoner6. That's all, everyone. Thanks for watching the video all the way to the end. I really appreciate it, and stay 6y.